Imagine a blank canvas, maybe 30 by 30 centimeters. It's just resting delicately on four small plastic caps, kind of levitating just an inch or two above a table that's been meticulously covered in thick plastic.
Right, yeah, completely prepped for a mess.
Exactly. I mean, we aren't in a traditional artist's studio right now, surrounded by delicate bristle brushes and wooden palettes. We are stepping into what feels more like a laboratory of fluid dynamics.
It absolutely is a laboratory.
So today we are doing a deep dive into a really fascinating stack of foundational sources and instructional texts from grupo raiim. Specifically, we're exploring the mind and the methods of master artist Laura Palacios.
Incredible material.
It really is. And our mission today is to decode the seemingly chaotic yet deeply calculated world of fluid painting, or, the pouring technique. And I actually want to address you, the listener, directly for a second, because if you have ever attempted this at home, you know the visual heartbreak we are about to tackle.
The infamous mud puddle.
Yes. Because, anyone can pour paint on a canvas. The internet is just flooded with videos of people dumping cups of bright pigments and watching them swirl. But why is it that when most people actually try it in their garage, they don't get those brilliant cosmic galaxies of color?
Right, they get sludge.
Exactly. They end up with this flat, muddy, depressing puddle of mixed up gray that just lacks all depth, structure, and life.
It really is, it's the ultimate heartbreak of the amateur painter. You pour with this expectation of magic, and you're met with just visual sludge. Because when you watch a master do it, it looks like a beautiful accident.
It looks completely effortless.
Yeah, the paint splashes, it drips, it spills organically over the edges. It feels entirely spontaneous. But what we're going to uncover today is that, well, true masters engineer a masterpiece before the paint ever even touches the canvas.
So the chaos is basically a lie.
Completely. We're moving past the illusion of chaos to understand the absolute architectural control required to make paint perform. We're going to look at how a master actually choreographs a physical reaction.
Okay, let's start with my own perceptual error, because I am completely guilty of this. Whenever I've watched a pouring video, my brain makes this immediate logical assumption. I assume that to make thick, heavy acrylic paint flow like a liquid, you just add water.
Which makes perfect sense, intuitively.
Right. You dilute it until it splashes easily. I mean, you want a liquid puddle, you add a liquid.
Yeah, and that assumption right there, that is the exact point where the artwork is destroyed before it even begins.
Wait, really? Just by adding water?
Oh, absolutely. If you just add excessive water to a heavy body acrylic, you're not creating fluid paint. You are fundamentally dismantling the structural integrity of the paint itself.
Wow, okay.
Think about what acrylic paint actually is on a microscopic level. It's a suspension. You have pigment, the microscopic crystals that give us color, and you have a binder, which is essentially a transparent acrylic polymer glue that holds those crystals in a flexible web.
So the paint isn't just color, it's an actual structural matrix.
Yeah. Precisely. And when you flood that matrix with water, you are diluting the glue. You space those polymer chains out so far that they just break. The pigment loses its grip.
Oh, I see.
So when you pour it onto the canvas, the colors have no defense against each other. The red and the blue don't sit side by side. They just crash into each other, and their pigments freely mix.
And that's how you get the mud.
Exactly. They bleed, creating that flat, uninspired, muddy surface without any internal tension. It's no longer paint at that point. It's literally just tinted water.
So by trying to make it move, you accidentally strip it of its identity. The colors just surrender to each other. So how does a master artist avoid this? I mean, if fluid painting isn't about making colored water, what is the actual principle at play here?
Well, the master operates on the profound principle of viscosity and structural resistance. Fluid painting at its highest level is about altering the chemical state of the paint so that it flows freely, yet fiercely maintains its individual boundaries.
It's like a paradox.
It is. You're demanding that the paint do two entirely contradictory things at once. You want it to glide effortlessly across a surface while aggressively defending its own borders against the colors right next to it.
It sounds a lot like trying to make a perfect vinaigrette.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
Yeah, like if you're making an emulsion and your fundamental chemistry is off by a fraction of a percent, the whole structure collapses. The oil and vinegar are just separate. So you aren't just splashing paint around hoping it looks pretty. You have to set up a highly controlled environment for a physical reaction to take place.
Yes. And how grupo raiim and Laura Palacios solve this consistency problem is through a very precise alchemy. The source material details this progressive discovery process. They start with a thick, high-quality, heavy-body acrylic paint. But instead of drowning it in water, the first thing they add is an acrylic pouring medium.
Okay, but what actually is a medium, though? Because I always see bottles of it in art stores, but I never quite understood what it does compared to just using water.
Right, so think back to our glue and crystal analogy. If water dilutes the glue until it breaks, an acrylic medium is essentially adding more of the pure liquid glue without adding any new color.
Ah, so you're giving it more structure.
Exactly. It thins the physical consistency of the paint, making it more liquid, but it actually reinforces those polymer bonds. It creates a massive flexible scaffold. Then and only then does the artist introduce a highly calculated minimal amount of water just to tweak the final flow.
But every color has a different chemical makeup, right? Like the antique gold they mentioned in the text, that's going to have metallic flakes in it. It's physically heavier than, say, a translucent cyan or magenta.
Oh, vastly heavier.
Right, so how do they know when the mixture is actually right if every single tube of paint behaves differently?
Well, they don't rely on measurements alone. They rely on a crucial visual and sensory test. And this test dictates the success of the entire piece. When the artist stirs this newly engineered mixture and lifts it with a spoon or a stirring stick, they aren't looking at the hue of the color.
What are they looking at?
They're looking at the kinetic flow. The paint must fall from the spoon in a continuous, unbroken thread. The text describes it incredibly explicitly. It has to look exactly like a thick stream of honey falling from a jar.
A completely unbroken thread, so if it drips like water, it's wrong.
If that liquid thread breaks into drips, the master knows instantly that the paint has lost its binding power. It's too thin. And the reason this unbroken thread matters so much comes down to the physics of evaporation.
How so?
Because when that paint is sitting wet on the canvas, it might look glossy and perfect, but over the next few days, as the water and the mediums evaporate into the air, that paint film is going to shrink. It's going to tighten across the canvas.
Oh, like a drum.
Exactly. If the binding power is weak, if that thread broke from the spoon, the paint will brutally crack and separate as it dries. The masterpiece will literally tear itself apart. The honey thread guarantees that the acrylic will cure as a single, flexible, unified skin.
But wait, hang on. If the entire goal of this agonizing alchemy is to make heavy paint slide across the canvas like honey, why go through this complex mixing process at all? I mean, they sell pre-fluid acrylics right out of the bottle at the art store. Why not just squeeze a bottle and save yourself the chemistry lesson?
Yeah, it's a fair question, and the sources actually address this. It ultimately comes down to artistic agency. You certainly can buy pre-fluid acrylics, but mastering this thick-to-fluid alchemy yourself is what gives you absolute, uncompromising control over the final tension.
So it's about not settling for the default.
Right. When you buy a pre-mixed bottle, you are accepting a factory's decision about how that paint should behave. When you mix it yourself, adjusting the medium to account for the heavy metallic flakes in the gold, feeling the weight of the water, watching the honey thread form, you're tuning your instrument.
That makes sense.
You're deciding exactly how aggressive or how passive that specific color will be when it hits the canvas. You're claiming ownership over the physics.
Wow. So you are dictating the terms of the engagement before the battle even starts. And speaking of that battle, getting the paint to flow is just the foundational step, isn't it? The true magic, the absolute core of the grupo raiim technique, relies on injecting a secret weapon into these cups of paint.
Yeah, yes, this is where it gets wild.
Yeah. After they have perfectly mixed the colors, the antique gold, the cyan, the magenta, and a large amount of white, they introduce an oily agent. The text mentions a medium oil, or even a few sprays of an aerosol oil. They drop just 2 or 3 tiny drops of this oil into the specific colors.
And with those 3 drops, the artist has just initiated an invisible war.
A war.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
This is the physical and optical logic that makes fluid art so mesmerizing. Acrylic paint, even mixed with medium, is fundamentally water-based. And as we know, oil and water violently reject each other.
Right, they refuse to mix.
Exactly.
Right.
By trapping oil inside this heavy, wet acrylic matrix, the master is creating a bomb of visual tension. The oil immediately wants to escape. It's hydrophobic. It wants to push the water away, rise to the surface, and breathe.
It's trapped in the honey, and it's basically fighting to get out.
But before that microscopic battle can unfold, the artist must set the stage. And they don't just start pouring these volatile colors directly onto the dry, woven texture of the canvas.
Wait, why not? I mean, the canvas is already white and ready to be painted on, right? Doesn't putting something down first just waste paint?
Not at all. Think about the microscopic surface of a raw or gessoed canvas. It is essentially a woven grid of mountains and valleys. It has texture, it has friction.
Oh, I see where this is going.
Right. If you pour your perfectly tuned honey thread colors onto that dry friction, the paint will snag. It will halt. The delicate edges of your colors will warp and distort as they drag across the weave. So first, the artist lays down a thick, heavy, generous base of pure fluid white paint. They pour it over the entire 30 by 30 canvas and smooth it out perfectly with a spatula.
Ah, so the white base isn't a background color. It isn't negative space in the composition. It is a frictionless track. It's an ice wing.
An ice rink, yes, exactly.
The canvas itself has too much friction, so the artist builds a wet, slick surface exclusively designed to let the other colors glide and slide without ever grabbing onto the underlying fabric.
That is the perfect way to visualize it.
Yeah.
The white layer is an active, functional architecture. It's a wet floor. And now the climax of the process begins. The artist takes those oil-infused colors, the heavy antique gold, the vibrating cyan, the deep magenta, and pours them directly into the center of this pristine white track.
They just pool there in the middle. They don't stop there. And reading the sources, this is the part of the technique that feels almost destructive.
It really does.
The artist then takes more of the white paint and pours a layer of it directly on top of the vibrant colors they just laid down. They effectively bury the color under a white blanket. And then, using a spatula or a flexible piece of rubber, the artist physically, forcefully drags that top layer of white entirely across the surface, swiping it over the hidden colors.
Visually, for a split second, it is terrifying. It looks like they have just ruined the piece.
Right.
It looks like they've smeared a flat white blanket over all that vibrant work. But remember the invisible war we set up. Remember the oil.
The oil is trapped underneath that white layer now.
Yes.
Huh.
And the moment that spatula drags the heavy white paint over the oil-infused cyan and magenta, the tension snaps. This is where physics takes the wheel.
What happens?
The oil, sensing the thinness of the paint above it, begins to punch through. The underlying colors forcefully repel the white paint sitting on top of them. The white paint physically cannot hold its ground against the hydrophobic reaction, so the white begins to tear open, and the brilliant raw colors from underneath erupt to the surface in these sharp-edged rings.
Like a submarine bursting through a layer of ice.
Exactly like that. But the master isn't done. Just when you think the canvas is doing all the work on its own, the artist steps back in with a final catalyst, a hairdryer.
Right. And the text from Grupo raiim is incredibly specific here. It mandates using the hairdryer on a low, gentle speed. They introduce heat and moving air across the surface of the wet paint. Why low and gentle? I mean, why not just blast it and get it over with?
Because if you blast it with high-velocity air, you're just mechanically blowing the paint around. You're forcing the shape, which completely ruins the organic structure. The goal here is thermodynamic. The heat from the hairdryer acts as an accelerant to the chemical tension.
How does the heat actually change the chemistry, though?
Well, it lowers the viscosity of the paint temporarily. It makes the fluid matrix just a tiny bit looser, just enough to let the trapped oil move faster and more aggressively. Meanwhile, that low, gentle air physically pushes the top layer of white paint even thinner on a microscopic level.
Just it's clearing the path.
Yes. The thinner the white blanket gets, the easier it is for the oil to break through. You are watching a geological transformation happen in seconds. The paint violently parts to form perfect organic structures that the master calls cellas, or cells.
When you look at those cells forming, I mean, it looks exactly like microscopic biology. Like looking through a microscope at a slice of living tissue, or looking through a telescope at a galaxy of stars being born. You have these perfect, intricate circles of magenta, laced with gold, floating in a sea of cyan.
Because you are watching physics paint the picture in real time. The artist is not holding a bristle brush, meticulously rendering a tiny circle to look like a cell.
Right, they aren't drawing it.
No. The artist has engineered a clash of densities, viscosity, and chemical repulsion. The perfect circles, the intricate webbing, the depth of the heavy gold sinking, while the lighter cyan floats. All of it is the natural, inevitable result of the rules the artist set in motion.
It fundamentally changes how you view the act of painting. It's not about imposing an image onto the canvas through sheer force of hand. It's about creating an ecosystem.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
Right.
If we synthesize this entire masterclass from Laura Palacios, we realize that painting fluid art this way is, well, it's an exercise in surrender. But it is a highly calculated surrender.
Yeah.
You're not forcing the brush. You are choreographing a physical reaction. You become a conductor of natural elements. You set the rules of the game. You dictate the thickness of the honey thread. You decide the exact placement of the frictionless white track. You plant the rebellious drops of oil. But ultimately, you step back. You allow the physics of the paint to express itself. You let the medium do what it naturally, desperately wants to do.
You give it a voice. I mean, I am just marveling at how a simple piece of stretched fabric and some standard acrylics transform into a living, breathing, moving entity just by understanding that simple honey consistency and instigating a war between oil and water.
It's pure magic.
It takes all the pressure off the hand and puts all the genius into the mind of the artist before the pouring even begins.
It really demands a much deeper respect for the materials themselves. You aren't just buying a pretty color in a tube, you are buying a chemical with specific behavioral traits. And your job, as the master, is to deeply understand those traits, to push them to their absolute breaking point, and then capture the exact moment they resolve their tension on the canvas.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now? I want to leave you with a final provocative thought, something that I hope will permanently shift how you walk through a gallery. The next time you stand in front of a massive, abstract expressionist painting in a museum, don't just look at the overall composition. Step close.
Very close.
Yeah. Look incredibly closely at the microscopic borders where two vibrant colors meet on the canvas. Look at the edges of those shapes. And ask yourself, was that precise, jagged, organic line painstakingly painted by the artist's hand? Or did the artist simply manipulate the fundamental physics of the universe, setting the stage, stepping back, and allowing the paint to paint itself?